Very good.
All right. So we talked about, what was our first pillar? Anybody want to say? It's an open book test. It's up in the top.
All out effort.
All out effort. All out effort. Second one, does anybody remember? Character. So we got A, we got C. The last one is T, trust. Trust on a team. I never realized how important trust is on a team until I just began to watch, and notice the difference between two totally different teams that had a ton of trust. And what I mean by that is the trust between the players, the trust that the players have in the coach, the trust that the coach and their coaching staff have among each other. All of those three different relationships are incredibly important, and you can definitely see the difference between teams that have that trust and teams that don't have that trust. Let's see if you guys recognize any of these things. For example, some things that you will find on a low trust team. These are low trust team signals, okay? All right. When trust has not been established or where it's been lost, every part of the team is impacted. Every single part in its progress. It's teachings, techniques, strategies. They're always questions where you have kids that are just constantly questioning you whenever you're whatever you say. Oh, not really. I don't think that works. I don't think and kids are kind of constantly questioning you on that. And so therefore improvement it's slowed down. Valuable time is wasted because we're having to kind of teach things and teach them over and over again. The athletes that got it first, they get bored. And then those who didn't get it because of lack of trust, they just they go even further into resisting. And so it just it causes this spiral of distrust. They begin to start thinking to themselves, this offense doesn't work. Why are we doing it this way? Or my teammates or coaches, they don't know what they're doing. Players lose the power of togetherness, and this is what ultimately ends up happening, is that players begin to start taking matters into their own hands and they start to play individually. And that's when you see, you can almost see it sometimes visually on a court. But I'm going to do this. We've seen it even in volleyball, where you got one volleyball player that's running all the way over here and all the way over here because they're I'm going to win this whole game by myself because no one else is doing it. They start kind of taking matters into their own hands. I'm not talking about a girl. She was hustling. Okay. So anyway, these are some of the signs that you see on low trust teams. Also, those kids that have those kind of stronger personalities, there's always this kind of friction when that happens. And then those who kind of have those weaker personalities, they kind of pull back, and they're just, they distance themselves, and they don't want anything to do with anything at that point. They just withdraw. Here's some things about a high trust team that you'll see. One of the things that you'll witness on a high trust team in action is the first thing you'll notice is that their energy and effort levels, they're both consistently high. It's like everybody is just flying around willing to give everything they have on those things. Coaches and players, they can freely express themselves with fewer words in less time and more directly without having hurt feelings or negative reactions. They don't have to walk on eggshells with every little thing they're saying because this offended me or that offended me or kind of thing, because there's that bond that you have with the players. We is more important than me, and the best players on those teams are usually your best examples of team values, your effort players. They're the ones that are really putting out that effort. They're really, really strong. But we'll get a little bit more onto that when we start talking about captains in just a second. On high trust team, there's a collective responsibility. Players and coaches are not driven by fear or anger, but by the feeling of not wanting to let each other down. Who's the greatest coach ever to walk the face of this earth? A college coach? Let's all say it all at once. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Coach K. Come on. Y'all know that he is the best. Coach K at Duke is absolutely fantastic. Great leader. I think the world of him. I've read several of his books, and he's just a phenomenal leader overall, right? One of the things that he says in one of his leadership books is he has one rule for his team. One rule and one rule only, and that rule is do not let your team down. In every decision that you make, whether it's to go out and party that night instead of studying for that exam, whether it's to cheer from the bench or not, or whatever that decision is, he wants you to ask yourself the question, is this decision going to let my team down? And if it is a yes, then you don't do it. And so that's his one rule, and I love that. It makes things very, very simple. A lot of studies indicate that military soldiers, my husband, he's a 26-year veteran, he's been deployed 7 times. He is a phenomenal soldier. But military studies show that most of the time, the things that are happening, those battlefront moments where there's heroic activity that's happening, it's not necessarily for performance. It's not because someone's shooting down orders. It's not for anything else other than it's for the person. You can ask my husband, he did everything because of the person that was standing right next to him. It's about that relationship that you have with your teammate. It's that trust relationship you have. It's the motivating factor. So it's so important. So how do we get our teams to that level, though? Like, we want a level of trust on our teams. One thing to make very, very clear, sometimes it's really easy as coaches for us to say, well, my teammates, my players are just not as good as your players. They don't want to trust. They don't want to do whatever. I would argue to say that everything that is required for trust, every single thing that is required for trust, is within the coach's ability to create or change. At some way or form or fashion, there is something that can be done. There's a way a coach can touch in that area. There's a thing that they can do that can perfectly know. Ultimately, a person has a will, right? You know, they're gonna have a will. But there are some things that coaches can do to kind of help touch in that area. For one, it cannot be built simply by talking about it. It's just like any other strength it takes working at, right? So it must be through purposeful actions. It must be for prayer. That's something that's so important, is that you are praying for your team. You're praying for your players. You're praying for the unity of your team. You're praying for your season. These things are so important. God can reach into those areas in ways that we absolutely never could. And a genuine personal, this is so important, guys. A genuine personal regard for the people that you're working with, the players and your coaching team. It's so important, guys, that we genuinely love our players. That it can't be fake. They'll know. They know when you don't really like them. They know when you don't care. You can try. You can put on the face. They know when you don't really care. You don't really want to be there. They will feel that, and it's a breaking thing for them. There's 3 relationships on the court to consider when considering trust relationships. One is the player-to-player relationship. How much do the players trust each other themselves? Coaches, we can actually be a part of helping them trust each other a little bit more. One is by understanding and appreciating each one of their roles and their strengths. One season I had a really hard time struggling trying to get players to crash the boards and I'm sorry. What is that in? To go for rebounds. I don't want to crash the boards. I'm sorry. To go get rebounds, right? So I'm so used to using this other jargon. So go get rebounds. You have to go get rebounds. And I couldn't get players to go get rebounds and just go after those rebounds. And but one particular practice, we had one fella. He just so happened to just like get 2 or 3 in a row, and we celebrated him like he just hit a game-winning buzzer. I mean, we were like, yeah, like look at that board. And then all of a sudden, all the other players began to get hype up and cheer him on too. Like he's like, and he's grabbing the boards and he's really going for it hard. Well, then guess what starts happening? Inevitably, other players on the team also, they want to be cheered for too. So they start competing with this guy and they start crashing the boards and they start going after these rebounds too, because they're going for the celebration, right? They want to know what they're celebrated for. And so that's one thing that's super, super important. So they just started to compete with each other and it happened. So that's my next point. We can teach them to compete, to push each other. When I played ball, I had this one season, I had this brutal coach. I mean, he was brutal and he would run it. We would have 3-4 hour long practices of just straight running sometimes where we didn't even touch a ball. And I mean, he would say, I'm gonna run you until my feet hurt. Like that's how he was. He's just a brutal guy. And at the end of every single practice, we would always have what they called at the time suicides. And if you don't know what they are, it's exactly what they sound like. They are just they're painful running sprints that you run and you touch lines and you go. And after a long practice, they're of course we dreaded the end of practice. And so at the end, every single day, I'm dreading. And finally one day, something, I don't know if I just lost it, but I just said, I'm gonna have to do this anyway. Why don't I just make a game out of it, make it fun? I have to, there's no way, there's no certain amount of performance. We're gonna have to do this at the end of the game. And so our coach had this rule where when we did suicides, the guards, the little girls, the smaller girls, they had to run them in a certain amount of time, like 35 seconds or something like that. I don't remember what they were. Tell me if I'm wrong, coaches, but even if that's reasonable, but it's a long time ago. 35 seconds. And the post players because I guess we're longer and maybe slower, I don't know, they gave us a few extra seconds. I was offended by that. Look, I can beat this, look at how little she is, look at my leg. I can beat these girls. And so I picked out one of the girls that I thought, might take the challenge quicker than everything, and I was like, I got you. And she's confused, but she's an athlete, so she took me up on it, and we raced. And when we were done, we were like, oh, let's go. And we went again. And it turned into the whole team started racing each other at the end of practice. And then before you knew it, the end of practice became our favorite time of the practice. We couldn't wait for suicide. Who can't wait for suicide? I don't know. But we turned it into, and what do you think happened? What do you think happened to our speed? What do you think happened to our strength? We got better. Competition is a beautiful, good thing. If you can some way turn any kind of drill that you're training people, or you're training them to do this or do that, you can somehow turn it into a competition. Competition equals growth. That's going to happen when they compete. And that's something I love watching some of these other coaches. I love seeing the competition there. It's a great thing, guys. Competition's a really great thing. The next thing is to teach them to build each other up both on and off the court, and resolve to never allow a player to speak destructively about another teammate, both in person and behind their back. That's biblical. I mean, I have a firm rule with the teams that I coach is I don't let, sometimes in the heat of a moment on the court, you could see a player who wasn't happy about something that one of their teammates did, yell across the court and say something that would be deflating to that person out loud. That is quickly resolved, that is quickly dealt with, because I don't allow that. I don't like that for two reasons. One, it deflates that player, and it's very destructive for the unity of the team. And for two, you just told the opponents that they got us. They got under our skin. We're flustered right now. We're frustrated. And so we don't allow that. We one of those things, that's something that I'll pull that player aside and I'll talk to them and say, we don't do that here. No, that's not the HRK way. And so we don't allow them to degrade each other, both in their faces and behind their backs. It's just incredibly important that we don't let them do that. The last one is team first, me second attitude. You usually figure out, you start to see signs of when it's the opposite, when it's kind of me first, team second attitude, when you start to see kids kind of like overly concerned at the end of a game, like what were my stats? What did I do? How many points did I make? And sometimes it's good for growth, right? Like I like to initiate that conversation. I like to keep those stats because I want to show improvement or where we need to do. But if I see that's becoming like something that is like you have to know this because it's the most important part of the whole game to you, that's when I will direct them to the whole team stat of those things. Like here, let me show you the only numbers that matter right now. And these are these numbers. And what are you willing to do before the next game to help get those numbers up for the whole team? And so we kind of redirect them to the whole team type mentality. Let's see, I think that one was all of those. Yep. So next one, coach to player. Coach Scott touched on this a little bit. One of the greatest ways that you can do this is just being very consistent in your standards. And consistent in your standards and expectations, no matter who the player is that you're dealing with. That's incredible. There's nothing more deflating than for a team to see this is our standard, but for this guy who's our highest scorer, he can break it. And, he's got a little leeway. That deflate. You talking about watching a team deflate really quickly. That's extremely important that we don't do that. Expectations and standards, just as another tip, really needs to be given out is the first possible opportunity. Your very first practice, even beforehand, just as much as you can, write it down, get it in writing. Because the thing is that whatever you're going, for example, playing time. You have a policy on your playing time, right? If you don't express that to the parents, then whenever you choose to put Sally or Tom or whoever in and not put the other person, you've already expressed something to those parents. The thing is they're left to translate it themselves if you haven't given them what that expectation is. So they're already getting some kind of communication from you, but they're going to decipher it on their own. And so it's just super important that you give super clear expectations right off the bat. The next thing is being a coach of your word. I don't have to say a whole lot about that. That's just so important. If you say it, do it. Confidence is based on your coach's preparation. Never stop learning. I'm going to reference Coach K again probably 6 more times today. But Coach K, listen, he does these things where he opens up his first practices. He kind of opens it up to like other coaches from all over the nation. They come, they pack the house, they watch his first practice every single year, and they bring in cameras and stuff. And so, it's really fun to watch them as they interview the players. And one particular, I'll never forget, there was this one particular player, and he goes, the camera's right at him, and he's like, so what's, your biggest thing? And he says, man, it's all eyes on Coach when he's on the court. And they're like, why? And he says, because he's the smartest man in this floor. And I know that this man has done his homework. I know that he is prepared. And I know that anything that he's going to tell me is going to make me a better player. Who coach in here, or parent for that matter, wouldn't dream to hear your players or your kids say that? Like, they know that whatever you're going to say is going to make them a better person. And so maybe we're not Coach K's, but we have this amazing tool in our back pocket. Maybe we don't have the years and the experience that we have, but we have this awesome tool. It's called YouTube. It's amazing. YouTube, you can learn anything on YouTube. You can learn, I spend so many times, especially during the season, helping with learning, maybe there's a play or something we need. I love YouTube, y'all. Get on YouTube and research the problems. Plus, you've got some veteran coaches here. You've got ADs. We've got great ADs for each individual sport that can probably give a great suggestion on a lot of things too. Do that research, but it's something about when your players know that you've prepared, you didn't just show up and let's see how today goes, or we just scrimmaged all day today, like those kind of things they damper the morale and the trust on the team. No surprises. You don't ask the players to do something in a game that they were not first expected to do in practice. So, if they're not expected to hustle in practice, don't ask them to pick it up in a game. I thought about this play I was thinking about doing. Let's try it right now. The last 30 seconds to get like that's really difficult. I mean, unless you're like trying to get like a certain shot off or something. But when you're not expecting it in practice, but then you expect it in the game, that sometimes can cause an issue. And then again, just like with the player-to-player, resolve to never speak destructively about your players, both in person and behind their back. Constructive is beautiful. Constructive is important. Constructive is what needs to happen. But destructive talk, especially destructive talk when you're talking to them behind their backs and stuff, it just sends the message to that player that you're talking to that if I mess up, they're going to do the same thing, say the same thing about me to someone else. And so we just want to make sure we just nip that in the bud. The last thing is a genuine love for your players individually. Guys, if we have this, like what else? All the other things fall into place, right? You're going to be, consistent in your expectations. You genuinely love them. These other things seem so much more easier, right? And then the last relationship, guys, and this is our final thing before we close out, is the coach and assistant coach, including captains, relationships. Involving them in your practice, involve them in your decision making. Guys, the number one reason that I've ever heard, I know that there's another one. I'll tell you one reason why coaches that don't come back, and that's usually because maybe they didn't agree with the coach's philosophy, but that's actually not the number one thing I've heard. Most of the times when a coach doesn't come back, it's because they didn't feel needed. They didn't feel like they were necessary. Why was I even here? I'm just another set of eyes on the court. I could be doing a gazillion other things right now. And so when you involve your other coaches, it builds an incredible amount of trust between delegate. If you've got a coach, for example, with volleyball who is, specializes in blocking or something, then hey, for this portion of the practice, why don't you teach them on blocking? Give them some roles. It's extremely important that they are doing something. Seek their input and meet with them regularly outside of practice too. Have some lunches with them. Go have some coffee. Get to know them. Talk about your coaching philosophies together and see if there's anything that can be fixed or that might not mesh well on the court. It's better to find that out at a lunch meeting than in the middle of a game, And then here's something I wanted to talk to you just briefly. I could talk all day about utilizing captains, but I'm just going to touch on captains. Captains are so much more than just coin tossers for the refs. I'm telling you guys right now, if you're not utilizing your captains, you're missing out on an incredible opportunity. Your captains, they have a unique ability to influence that team in a way that we can't. They reach into them. They're the locker room talker, right? They're the natural energy feeders on your team. And the best way to find them is not just to say, okay, well, who's the oldest, or who's the highest grade one here, who's the senior, who's the highest scorer, who's the whatever, who's the fastest, who's the, no. You want to look, Coach K, again, on his first days of practice, he hardly does any training or teaching. He sits back and he watches personalities. That's what he's doing on his first day. He's just watching personalities. And what you'll identify is you're going to identify a particular person, maybe one or maybe two, a particular person that is leading the team, good or bad, but leading the team in energy and how they're acting out there and how they're performing. They're leading the team, good or bad. And the best thing that you can do is you harness that, you pull them as your right-hand man. You start to bring them in. But I have to give you one caveat that's incredibly important. And this is so important, guys. This is advice. They have to be one of, if not the hardest worker on your team. Because when you have a captain who is the lazy one, then this what they're going to follow. The rest of the team's going to follow right along in the suit. Okay, so it has to be one of your hardest workers on your team. So watch that personality, those natural influencers, those natural people. Because again, they're going to be able to reach the rest of the team when maybe the team's frustrated in an area that, as a peer, in an area that we can't. But in all of them, your captains and your assistant coaches, just value them. They're not just there because no one else would take the job. Okay, well, the volunteer position. They were selected. It's an honor. It's a privileged role. It's an important role. It's very, very important. So it's very important to value them. And lastly, again, for the last time, to save repeat, resolve to never to speak destructively about your assistant coaches and your captains behind their backs or to their faces. This is so absolutely important. It's a great thing for trust. So we've got these three things. So how do we keep the main thing the main thing? That was the original question, right? How do we keep the main thing the main thing? How do we go against the grain in the sports world where society is telling us that these kind of traits are not important anymore? That's not it. It's just, other things are far more important. It doesn't simply happen by talking about it, wishing, or hoping for it. We must first pray, as we talked about earlier. We pray for them. We pray for our teams and our athletes often. And then we must take deliberate and intentional attempts to act. That's what we just talked about, our three things. All-out effort. We get daily touches on all-out effort, rewarding them on all-out effort. And when they're given those things, we reward them. We reward them in the area of character and personal accountability and the things that Coach just put. Some of those things, those good, beautiful touch points that he just gave about teaching character, giving your mom a rose. I love that. I really am expecting a rose this year. Thank you. My son's going to play for you. I'm so excited. And then just building an environment of trust. Just creating this environment of a trusting environment. A lot of that comes with just spending time with them and knowing them and loving them and truly loving them. Have sleepovers, do your ice cream. These things are so absolutely important. This is what sets us. Why we homeschool? We want them set apart, right? We want to pull our kids out and give them that other opportunity. We have a great opportunity to do that here at HRK. So that is it. I just wanted to say thank you guys for all of you guys that are past, present, and future coaches, or maybe not, and just good moms and dads that are putting your kids in these programs and are really blessing us greatly. We are grateful for you, and we just want to thank you guys so much for that. So we're going to close out with prayer, and then we'll have Sharon, who, by the way, I want to mention, brought all that food in here, and she is so sweet. She set all that up for you guys and brought that in. So if we could all just say thank you to Sharon for doing that. It's so sweet. So Sharon and Carrie are going to come up. I don't know, baby, we might. I don't know if you want to do questions, but it's kind of getting late. But let's pray. If someone has a pressing question, then we can do that real quick.
What coaches do you need for this season?
Well, you're spilling the beans. We've got two people coming up. They're going to talk about that in just a minute. They're gonna not sell y'all on coaching. But thank you. And so I'm going to have Pam come up here and pray and close us out, if you don't mind, or John, one of you guys was going to come up and pray because, you have a prayer for us.
I guess I can come up too.
A couple things, real briefly. You guys had a lot of great information. Just want to cover one thing, and that is the acronym TEAM, team. Together, everyone achieves more. We've all seen that stuff like that. But I also, as Nate touched on earlier, plan those specialty things. And Scott's talked about going getting ice cream. Plan that trip to feed my starving children as a team. Go to a college basketball game as a team and see what they see. And my guys were telling me they learned so much from going to that. It was kind of, sorry to put my back to you guys, but it was really important that they saw those things. But anyway, this was a prayer. I believe we said this at the retirement. You want to add to that, honey? You want to read it?
I read it the first time. You can read it.
Okay, this was at our retiring from HRK in Ephesians 3:16 through 21. It may not sound exactly like your version, but this is the prayer that our God would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner man, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled up to all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us, to him be the glory in the church and at HRK and in Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen. God bless you guys.
I'm Carrie Ward, the husband of Scott, and we've been around HRK, I guess, for 8 years now, and it's family. It's who my kids hang out with. It's who Scott and I hang out with, and I think that's an important thing to recognize. And we've been talking a lot about what coaches can do and what your kids, our children, are going to get out of this program, because that's what we're putting into it. So a couple things. One, there's always a need for coaches. Okay, there's need for coaches. Volleyball, basketball. We're looking for track, and that's a new area, which I think we already have a volunteer. But the thing about it is, and I think Scott hit on it so well, is that you don't have to be a superstar, okay? You don't have to be Michael Jordan to coach our basketball program. You have to be a loving parent who wants to love and spend time with your kids, right? Because my daughter went off to college now, and so now I'm a wreck whenever I talk about kids leaving the nest. It's so quick, and they say that to you when, it's they're babies and they're crying all night, and you're just like, I hope it's quick, because this is seeming like forever right now. But now it's so quick. And I am so glad that we've had this time to be in sports with our daughters and coaching them in volleyball and basketball, because it's time we'll never get back, and it's such a blessing. And like what Coach Jen talked about, there's YouTube. We're in a whole new time frame right now here, folks. If you want to find out about how to coach volleyball, how to coach track, how to do, start a softball league, Google, how do I do this? And you won't be able to sleep at night, because you can just spend hours of looking at that. We've done a really good job. Our athletic directors have done, especially in basketball, a really good job of finding like the PGC clinics and stuff that coaches can benefit from. And so there's things out there that are helps. And also, you don't have to start as a head coach. It's really helpful to have an assistant, and that someone that'll be there and come alongside of you, and so that head coach knows they're not alone. They're not alone in it, and that they're also not going to be the only one shagging balls, right? So there's a lot of levels, and so don't be afraid to coach. Don't be afraid, if you are a coach, to say, hey, I see a lot of things in you. You really seem to like being here and spending time, or maybe watching. You want to just move 15 feet more to the center of the court, and we'll just call you assistant. You know, and reach out and talk to people. So that's it. And then also going past the coaching and reaching out to coaching. There's still people, even though we have all this social media presence and all this new technology now that they didn't have 20 years ago when they started it, there's still people that don't know about HRK and the homeschool community and homeschool sports. So chat it up when you're at co-op or when you're at the park or when you're at these places, because I know there's opportunities for kids now to go play at their public school or go play at different places, but it's a community and this is really good, and it's an awesome place to raise your kids and have other moms and dads that, you know, your kid ends up graduating and they have several moms and dads who have spoken the word into them and shown really who Christ is. So reach out. So Sharon.
Finally, I'm just standing up just to say thank you. I think the idea for this evening, I think it was sparked sometime last summer. Jennifer and a few coaches went to a coaching clinic, something, and had all this valuable information. So the idea was sparked then. So it's been an idea in her mind and then the board's mind this year. And so just thanks to Jennifer for really pulling our evening together. And you know, for preparing the content she shared, but then also it was great to hear from Nate and Scott, and then it was also a great treat for us to be able to meet the Ostranders if you haven't met them, or just to spend some time with you and to hear from you, to kind of see where, you know, the whole program started. So that's it. I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you for everyone that took time to come, especially because it was, since we haven't done it before, it's kind of like, well, what's this going to be like? So thanks for taking the time to come.
We did many years ago. We used to have coaches.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
So that's it.